All right, boys and girls, we are back with another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. I am your host, Ben Domenech. You can email us, as always, at radio@thefederalist.com. Follow us on Twitter, at FDRLST. You should also subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is where I'm talking today to Senior Editor Chris Bedford. It's good to see you, Chris. How are you?
Good to see you, Ben.
You've been covering these conventions for the past 2 weeks for us. The run-up to and the ridiculousness of the celebrity-filled Zoom convention that Joe Biden had. And now the kind of oddly impressive approach that the Republicans have been using. And you know that it's going bad when you have former Clinton and Obama people, including this morning, I believe it was Jim Messina, talking about, well, you know, people are talking about the stagecraft and all the goodness there. But, you know, Stalin used stagecraft, too. so when you see...
So did Barack Obama.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not like a set of columns behind himself in the middle of a stadium or anything. So let's talk for a minute about what you're seeing from the Republican convention briefly before we get into talking about what's been going on elsewhere in America, which seems to be a lot more important. Your reaction, having had to watch, by dint of your employment with us, this many hours of canned political TV.
I relish in it, Ben. I love my job. I do. It's good. I get to go to bed at 3 a.m. Sober. It's a strange experience. The pace was one of the first things I noticed, how much more quickly it moves, despite actually being longer, typically. And I think that's a huge amount to do with, it took me a little while thinking about it, just getting rid of the variety host. This is not an episode of America's Funniest Home Videos, where in between a very moving video about Biden, what he struggled with, or in between this or that, or someone talking about drug addiction, you go back to Julia Louis-Dreyfus saying, well, wasn't that moving? On to the next video. That really was a complication.
What, can I interject there? Do you think that decision to not have an MC has clearly served Republicans well?
Very well.
Do you know whether that was a decision that they made in the aftermath of what they saw going with the DNC? Because it seems to me most of these decisions had to be in the can in advance of it.
Well, I don't have any insight on what the decision process was for the Republican Party on that. I kept on digging in and saying, well, what are you planning? What are you planning? Mainly interested in if there were going to be live audiences, which I'm told we should expect in the coming days, more of what we saw with Melania last night. The Republicans did have the benefit of watching the Democrats go before them, but Republicans typically aren't good at throwing anything.
No.
Granted, Tom Perez is a historically bad DNC leader who makes excuses for every amount of things. He's got no money. He can't fundraise. They basically, the only thing that they've made the news for other than losing to the GOP is firing white staffers in the past year. It's not a very impressive organization. They didn't do a very good job, but Rana did a phenomenal job for the RNC. I'm thoroughly impressed, and as you were mentioning yesterday evening as we were watching, how shocking, how courageous some of these decisions were.
Yeah.
I remember, it brought me back a little bit to the Las Vegas debate when Donald Trump was up there and he was debating Hillary Clinton and gave the most forceful defense against abortion and of life and description of what abortion is that I've ever seen from a national politician. And we've seen very pro-life committed people like Rick Santorum on the stage before. None of them have gone where Donald Trump went.
So let's talk about that for a minute. There was a run in the middle of culture war figures that I feel was unprecedented in terms of all the years that I've watched Republican conventions. And I have a theory about that. It amounts to this. One of the virtues, sometimes it is a failure, but one of the virtues of the Trump people writ large is that because they have no experience in politics before a handful of years ago, they don't have any of the built-in consultant-based bias that says, this is the thing you say loud and this is the thing you whisper. And so they say everything at the same volume, which is 11. And they don't know that okay, you can say these things about taxes at 11, but if you say the abortion thing at 11, that's a problem. You should just whisper that. Say that at like a 2, and preferably only behind closed doors and with a single camera on you so that it can't be used in any effective way.
The description of that abortion brought tears to my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
That's so...
Abby Johnson's.
Yeah, it was such a sad,
Can you imagine
horrible
the
thing.
George W. Bush consultant team or the Mitt Romney consulting team or really, honestly, any like sort of super professional Republican organization allowing someone to say a line, a pre-approved line, because it came out, it was not something that was added in there or ad-libbed, saying that abortion has a smell? I mean, on primetime TV?
If you haven't seen this speech from Abby Johnson, it's worth checking out because it's difficult viewing, but she was correct, and she said a lot of people who are very pro-life approach this as a more at a distance and just know that it's wrong and understand that that's life. And she says she's seen it and smelled it, and it's gripping.
Abby Johnson, the former Planned Parenthood worker, she was followed by Nick Sandmann, a kid who has been at the center of a media firestorm, lived to tell the tale. When I first got the advance, they send out to all the journalists standard kind of embargoed remarks. I was looking through, and you always kind of spot, this one looks like a little weaker, this one looks a little stronger.
Not everything was strong last night.
No, which is one of the reasons, but I want to get back to sort of who was strong or not. But when it came to Sandmann, his remarks were so strong that my immediate reaction was, why didn't they put him on later? Because like flip-flop him with Eric Trump or something. Nothing against Eric Trump and his remarks, but it's like, stick him at the beginning. Everybody knows, there's no mystery about Eric Trump. But like this kid and his remarks and what he's willing to say was impressive. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, what is CNN going to do with this? How are they going to handle this? And we got our answer, which is that now that he owns them, they ran his entire speech.
He's in charge now. And they did air it, which was surprising.
You were surprised by it? I felt like they had to. I felt like they would have been completely slagged if they ran.
By who?
I think they're.
Hook?
I think. Well, he was having a little bit of a day himself. I don't know if you saw that, but anyway, the dedication to putting those culture war issues in sequence, so that like there's not going to be any mystery about this. We're going to have, we're going to have the granddaughter. We're going to have Abby Johnson. We're going to have Nick Sandmann. This is a series of people saying
women's bathrooms being protected from mentally ill men,
religious freedom, pro-life things, anti-trans bathrooms, more pro-life things, and Sandmann with both pro-life and anti-media and the media's lying about you things,
and anti-activists. Although they weren't. I don't think they were as harsh as they could be on how Nick Sandmann was targeted by these activists for that clip. And he did go into it when he said, "We got him, Grandpa." Yeah. But he was targeted, and it was his hat. It was his smile. He's got an awkward smile. It was the fact that he's a young white man standing there in that crowd, targeted by a group of racial activists.
To get back to the production for a minute, what are we learning about the differences in the challenges of putting these things on? Because beforehand, I think you had shared with me, a couple of other people had shared with me, the things I'm hearing from folks at the RNC is that, they're scared. Democrats are really confident. Democrats have had months to prepare because they knew they weren't going to have a real life IRL convention. Republicans are coming up, sort of having to do this on the fly. Plus, they've got the whole investment of Hollywood and celebrity. And
Republicans were worried about that. Yes. The RNC was surprisingly confident.
Really?
The word I was getting week after week, and I was in some of the rooms where some of the Republicans or conservatives would say, "What are you doing?" John Voight and Lieutenant Dan are not going to pull this off. Yeah. They have Steven Spielberg. Yeah. And the RNC is like, yeah, but Steven Spielberg can't give a $1 million in-kind donation to the DNC, and they can't afford to pay him. Yeah. So they're not using him. And don't worry, we have this covered. But,
I have a theory
when you hear the RNC or any Republican say, we've got this covered, you're like, but do you really?
I have a theory about that, and it's that conventions, having lost their real utility ever since the end of the 1960s, are now effectively long infomercials that contain occasional moments of reality TV. And the moment of this that I recall particularly is from the 1996 convention, when everybody made a big deal about the fact that Elizabeth Dole took the mic off the stand and walked into the crowd and talked around to people, and then that was a big deal that she did that. It's ridiculous now in retrospect to compare that to the kind of reality TV experiences that we have this moment. And so if you're working with people
when life is a reality TV show,
if you work with people who do good infomercials, Democrats don't even watch infomercials. How are they supposed to know how to create them? And so you have a pretty high quality, production and a pretty well-crafted message with a few exceptions. So let's talk about those exceptions. What were some of the lowlights to you from the back?
I don't like any of the politician speeches at all.
Really? Even Tim Scott's, even Nikki Haley.
There was a few. I couldn't stand Nikki Haley.
Well, but that's just because of your own personal hatred.
I also felt like that we went over this a little bit yesterday, so I don't want to trot too hard on Nikki Haley, but I felt like she was reading to a classroom of fourth graders she'd never met, a book she'd never read, and if you're talking about your parents and your family and how they came over here and your struggle was personal, and I can tell you're reading it for maybe the second time. I'm completely unmoved.
But I think part of that is
comes after. I mean, she was the night before.
But part of that
to the lobster.
Part of that politician lineup. There are two things they're going at. They're going with normal people,
which are so much better,
which are excellent, and which are designed to reach normal people. I think, and then I think they're going with politicians who present a vision of a united Republican Party that is designed to lure back into it some of these suburban middle-class voters who peeled off in 2018, either by voting for a moderate Democrat, which happened in many Trump districts, or by just not voting at all. And to me, this is kind of saying, hey, you can come on back now. You like these people. You might have been a Rubio supporter.
Here and
everybody's here. We're all in this. And to me, I mean, that's part of why you roll. Part of the reason that you roll out some of these interesting choices with these politicians, people who you might not be all that familiar with. I mean, think of the people they're putting in prime time.
Some of the state senators and state legislators have been the top ones in state
That's the
appointees.
point, yeah. It's like, here's someone you didn't know existed. You're tired of Washington, so we're not putting a heavy emphasis on Washington. Mm-hmm. We're rolling out a diverse group of people from across the country, and you end up with, guys from the Iron Range, and that sort of thing.
That was so great. And the Attorney General of Kentucky was. I've read a little bit about him as a young Attorney General and someone.
Daniel Cameron, not David Cameron, because several people said David Cameron yesterday. And I kept being like, why are they having David Cameron? This is a whole huge mistake.
That would be really.
Did Steve Hilton get in Trump's ear on this?
I had the experience of being in London in 2006 during those elections, and I knew that David Cameron would ride his bike to Parliament every day, and it was exposed by, I think, the Sun or somebody, that he was having his limousine drive behind his bicycle to bring his business shoes to Parliament with him. So I had the added benefit of hating David Cameron 10 years before most other people decided they hated David Cameron. I'm like, no, that guy's a fraud.
The weakest moment of the evening from last night to me actually surprised me, which is that I had been looking forward to Mike Pompeo's speech. The president's been enormously successful at foreign policy. He has defeated, or at least completely destroyed,
marginally disrupted
the assumptions of the foreign policy blob. Those 70 names that ran in the Wall Street Journal and were assembled together, most of whom endorsed Hillary Clinton last time around, have made it clear that all they care about is power, especially after this epically historical, however you want to say it, deal that was brokered between Israel and the UAE. In other words, the approach has been successful. The idea that we were going to start World War III over moving an embassy or killing Soleimani or something like that, which is, again, goes back to the whole...
They don't have any experience. No one there said, we're not allowed to kill Soleimani.
You're not allowed to do that. Well, why?
I already did.
And so the upshot of this is an area where they should really be able to spike the football. Instead, you have a speech that it becomes controversial because Pompeo's giving it from Jerusalem. You do it, though, with a camera setup I don't know who was running the camera setup. The folks over at Commentary were musing that maybe they were having his wife shoot it or something like that to get around the different rules. But the point is, that's a grand shot of the old city that you didn't get at all. And Pompeo's speech was basically just a standard bullet point speech, and not something that really, I think, could connect as much. So that was the disappointment for me.
I mean, Pompeo's a very effective bureaucrat. He's been put
perhaps the most effective one in terms of the last year.
He's been very effective. Him and he's one of the most effective in the Trump administration. Very professional. He's one of the few. He's actually an example of what a lot of the foreign policy folks could have done had they decided to not write stupid op-eds in the Washington Post and actually come in with talent and just do the job and get on board with the America First, like a lot of them actually kind of were in the first place. But the idea that I've seen floated around multiple times that he is some kind of political successor to Donald Trump. I mean, can you imagine the hangover that we would get as reporters who are busy with the excitement if it was Nikki Haley, Mike Pence, or Mike Pompeo after Donald Trump? I mean, I hope he keeps tweeting because this has got to go on.
It'll be interesting to see the different folks here who I'm less interested in that 2024 game now, only because I think politics now moves so rapidly.
Oh, there's a battle right now.
Yeah. So, but when it comes to any other disappointments that you had, what was anything that kind of fell flat for you or that you think could have been improved?
I think I understand the importance of it because Donald Trump is someone who, when you first look at him on paper, it's 3 marriages, children with multiple marriages, accusations of affairs, accusations of bankruptcy or legitimate bankruptcy. Legitimate multiple times. You look at this and you're kind of like, wow, this is like an American family on steroids. And then what's really peculiar about the whole thing is that he has wonderful children. He's a billionaire in New York City whose children are sober. It's very rare to get to that class of person with unlimited resources and your pursuit is hunting as opposed to methamphetamines for your children. He's got children who love him, a wife who loves him very much. Now, this is something I know that they want to promote. Like, this is a family guy, and it's against the media narrative. It's against what you'd read on paper. But I felt that his family, in some ways, fell flat. I was unimpressed with the speakers. I did think Eric Trump gave the probably best speech, and Tiffany was interesting to listen to because we haven't seen her in 4 years, and she gave a vocal defense of her father.
She also was challenged. They gave her some challenging things to talk about. They gave big tech to her, though I do think it was a mistake to give her I'm familiar with the challenges of hunting for a job comment. I don't
believe her. I didn't believe that for 1 minute.
Yeah.
But
she did have
it
nice
might be difficult to be hired right now as a Trump. I would say if you don't want to work for the organization or the White House, I mean, it's a liability.
Melania went on a little too long, and I think they gave her a little bit too much to do, but I think that she this is checking a very different box than a lot of the other people who are in this. Again, I think that Melania speech is about reaching out to women who are looking for a reason to back Donald Trump and to sort of point to that and say...
How intimidating is she? Usually the person who's very popular at daytime talk is like the kind of fat, older person who's always smiling. I mean, she's intimidating to me, and I don't have body issues, and I'm a man.
I think that more of it is about see their marriage isn't falling apart. See that things you read in the tabloid that isn't true. See that this is all these different aspects of her that I like. This feeling of empathy that she's offering to people going through hard times, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, it's about giving them material to have conversations with when they get together with their other female friends that say, well, but if I don't believe that thing that you just read on the Daily Mail about what's going on between them. I don't believe that thing that you're saying that she isn't actually going to vote for him or something like that. The point is she is the focus of a relentless amount of gossip. If she was married to a Democrat president, she would be the most popular woman in America. She would have the biggest book deal in America. She would be on every Vogue cover, etc. and they would have taken her voice and added it as an option instead of Alexa or Siri.
The idea that Michelle Obama is a gorgeous fashion icon and that Melania is like a frumpy, horrible person is.
Oh, they don't say frumpy and horrible. They say much worse things.
I'm trying.
Much worse things.
It's
every time she talks, they're like, this reminds me of fascist dictatorship.
So I kind of thought it was a little bit of media bait for most of Ivanka's speech. Completely, because they put her out there, and the liberals just want to be like, you don't live here, you're not from this country, you've got an accent, you don't belong. And it's like, you're not allowed to say that.
Yes, look, tonight, this night, and this convention really has been, in many instances, an example of how Trump is king troll. He really does try to just, anything he does, he just grinds it into the people who he dislikes. And I think that this is one of those events that just kind of doubles down on that. We have a couple other things to look forward to in the coming days, including speeches from people like Kristi Noem. Tom Cotton's going to give a speech, which I think, if you're talking about the 2024 things, people will pay attention to that.
It's another shot at the foreign policy, too.
Yeah. Exactly. But again, we're all in this together. We had Rand Paul, we're going to have Tom Cotton. We're going to, we're going to sort of balance
Who aren't exactly the closest of friends.
No, they don't.
Both of them are kind of difficult to be around.
Well, they both have their limitations as politicians, but I think that it's one of these things where, again, it's about we're trying to represent a united front. We're also trying to represent optimism, the idea that we've turned a corner, et cetera, and that gets to the core error that I feel like Democrats made in this whole time, which is that Joe Biden and his team, to the extent that Joe Biden runs the campaign, the Obama team, came to the conclusion, I think, in the summer that everything was set pretty much the way it was. It wasn't going to change. We have to keep it from changing, so we have to avoid a Hillary Clinton on 9/11 moment of Joe falling over in public. And as long as we avoid that, we can make this election about coronavirus and about the president's errors or failures as they see it. We just have to rely on our media friends over at CNN to do the Cuomo brothers, variety hour, and do some prop comedy and distract from the fact that we're responsible for basically a quarter of the deaths in the country. And as long as we can do that,
you could put Cuomo himself up there to talk about how he's defeated coronavirus.
We climbed the mountain. Yeah, you built that mountain.
It's built. I bought that poster. It's really trippy.
I would not want to get high and look at that. So the thing though that I think they miscalculated was by focusing on that, trusting the media to go along with it, then we can ignore everything else that's going on in the country because that's less important. Nothing's more important than the masks. They have this naturalization ceremony. They come back and Dana Bash is like, well, they weren't wearing masks. It's like, well, they all got freaking tested. That's the same.
It's insane.
But by the way, for all the Hatch Act talk, my assumption is that they recorded all those things in advance. The pardon and
they did them both during the day as part of official business that was filmed and then shown at the RNC.
And it's not like Joe Biden used footage of him getting the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Obama in the White House in his convention, though. I guess actually,
I thought both of those were awesome, phenomenal trolls also of the Democrats to be like, how dare you naturalize citizens, or how dare you pardon the criminal who's giving back to his community? They were perfect, and the fact they were done during the day. If the White House didn't have every lawyer from Timbuktu to review it, then that's gross negligence. But it's official business that the president is allowed to take part in. That was shown as video.
I think that this is one of those instances, though, where the larger political mistake. And I think it could end up being on the same level as Hillary Clinton not going to Wisconsin, is Joe Biden and his team choosing to not talk about and condemn violence and riots across the country. And because of a couple of things, but mostly because we know it's going to get worse. It's not going away. We're 67 days out from this whole thing happening and going down. People are going to be voting.
Things aren't quieting
already.
Down.
They're not going to quiet down.
2 people murdered. And people shot last night.
And you heard that from Don Lemon last night, Don Lemon on CNN.
The polling's coming in. We should stop rioting.
You know what's interesting about that statement? CNN has not released a poll since the Biden convention. In fact, of the networks that have released polls, CBS and CNBC have. CNBC's is a battleground poll that's actually done by a Democrat. firm, which shows Biden in the lead in all the battlegrounds except for North Carolina, but Trump is within
5-6 points.
Everything from 2 to 6 points.
Yeah.
And again, Democrat firm, so that means you typically tack on a couple points to the Republican in that instance. That is a situation that Democrats should find terrifying. And when Don Lemon is not smart enough to keep things quiet or behind, when he says polls and focus groups are showing people are tiring of this, he's sending a message or trying to send a message to the Biden
It's
campaign.
not exactly a dog whistle. It's pretty out front.
No, it's just a whistle. It's just a whistle.
Hey, guys.
So what do you think the Biden campaign can do about what they see going on in swing states, Minnesota, Wisconsin? Also, I think that Portland says a lot about what the left is offering in terms of their response to it. What do you think that he can do at this moment? Lemon says he should give a speech. I don't even know what he would say in that speech.
I mean, the Biden campaign is not a nimble campaign by any stretch. It's kind of the traditional classic campaign that's already got his cabinet, already got his transition team. Everything is all set, and Joe Biden is not in control. They gave him a Wizard of Oz convention, which we commented on, largely a moderate America, everything is good message, but it was completely in fantasy land as far as where the country is. And they were just like, we got a black female.
They gave him that message, but they didn't give the rest of the convention that message.
No, but it was him. It was introduced each night and it closed each night.
I guess I found Obama's message to be absolutely chiding and just like a reminder of how much.
Well, the campaign can't tell Obama what to do. He's in charge.
Fair point. Never mind. I take that back. He's the one who can say what he really thinks, which is. I have a lot of problems with all of you people.
Yeah, exactly. I got an axe to grind with you and you and you and you. And wait till you see my wife.
Yeah.
I don't think they have the flexibility because the left is largely in control, and the left doesn't hate these mobs. They want to win, but they think the mob's on their side.
Yeah.
I think it would take mental gymnastics for them to betray their own shock troops before they're in control.
The problem is that what he would say in a normal political environment would be, we need justice in all of these cases. We need police reform. We need, I've supported this reform bill and that reform bill, and we're going to push for those. We're going to have a commission, a national commission to study this problem, etc. But rioting and destroying property of law-abiding citizens just because you are angry about this is not acceptable. And
it's not even acceptable to riot against lawbreakers.
Yeah.
That's called a lynching.
Yeah. Well, but my point is just he would in some way. In fact, if he were a candidate at this point, I think he should go there. I would like to see him talking to these people in Wisconsin.
That'd be good optics to see them throwing bottles at him.
No, not the people throwing bottles. The people who are fixing things and saying, "I want to be a part of fixing this," and rebuilding your business, and that's what we're going to do. Build back better. He's letting his own coalition tear down everything that these people have built.
Kamala might be able to do that, but we've seen that Joe Biden. They must have access to the rapid result tests. They're expensive.
They do.
Socialites in Los Angeles have them. The White House has them. The press corps is subjected to them. Joe Biden was did not hugging Kamala Harris. That was not an actual matter of logistics. That was a message of fear to the American people.
Yeah.
Or he's a hologram and they don't want to give away the game.
Well, I look at this situation in Kenosha, and it's something that we had talked about earlier in this process, that unless steps are taken, these things are not going to stay confined to, for lack of a better term, protest cities. Places like Portland that seem to be always tearing themselves apart. It's going to migrate out, and that you're going to see it eventually run into cities where riots and looting are going to take place in areas where there are a lot of people who own firearms. They are hunters. Or
we saw what happened last night.
People
are shot. The police aren't stopping you, but citizens will stop you, and they have every right to stop you if you are a looting rioter attacking people.
What do you think about the argument from the right that the president isn't doing enough about this, that he owns a good deal of this, and that Chad Wolf and DHS, they're part of this, and they're going to get the blame if they don't do more, if they don't roll tanks in to, or the equivalent of it, to shut these things down? What do you think of that argument?
I buy it much more toward Bill Barr, who I've been disappointed in. It's a rare thing to hear me say that. I don't think that tanks or any kind of show of force from the federal government would do if you have the means to stop these rioters in these cities. Boston, if these guys were to riot in Boston, where it's not that bad, those police can put that down.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got the horses, they've got bikes, they've got armor, they've got APCs. They're just not using it.
Yeah.
And Chad Wolf wouldn't be able to change that. What I'm upset about is the crackdown that was announced from the White House and patting each other on the back over arresting people who tried to tear down a statue in front of the White House. We have groups like the Ford Foundation giving millions of dollars, Bank of America giving millions of dollars to these terrorist groups, Marxist groups whose actual mission is political intimidation and violence to get across goals. That's terrorism. The companies, the foundations should have their assets frozen. The companies should have assets frozen. The leaders should be arrested. People who are distributing money should be arrested. And I'm very surprised, and I sure hope that there's something being worked on for this, because I haven't seen any signs beyond a couple of arrests that the FBI is down there. I mean, when we had lawlessness in the 60s, we ignored the mafia because we didn't want to pay attention to it, but they would send down 500 agents to catch Bonnie and Clyde, and then later on with the lynchings and the organized violence that we saw in the South against voting rights, the FBI dismantled networks that were entrenched in power, from the mayor to the police chief to the churches, dismantled them. They have the ability to do that. Why are we allowing a terrorist insurrection to be funded by our corporate leaders? Why is Twitter giving money?
Well, Twitter is giving money to Ibram X. Kendi's thing, which will obviously, a centerpiece of his book is establishing a completely separate race commission in America, an agency that would include people like him, that would be completely divorced from any kind of responsibility to the executive branch, with the ability to choose to determine whether any level of legislation, any act, any decision by an agency was racist or anti-racist. And it can
It's a racist body. It'd be nice. It'd be,
it's utterly totalitarian.
It's I don't even want to use the comparisons that come to mind, because I typically discredit arguments.
Yeah. Let's look out and project things a little bit. Coming out of this convention, even if Donald Trump doesn't get a bounce out of it, Joe Biden didn't get any out of his, but let's just say
it was terrible.
let's just say for the sake of argument that Trump does not get much of anything. Things stay kind of the way they are. What does that do to the debates? Does it make them more challenging for Biden, given that before it really seemed like he only had to, not crap his pants, not fall over on stage,
Still time.
like just like as long as he came out and basically gave an argument, it would seem to me that that's the sort of thing that would stand up. But it becomes a little more problematic if he actually has to execute what is some pretty difficult jujitsu and making an argument, questions that will absolutely be asked, because he won't get the kind of kid glove treatment that he got from David Muir and Robin Roberts. The question will be asked of him about these riots, what to do with them, what ought to be done about violence. This is going to continue to the point where we have debates. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen? What do you think this does in terms of creating a challenge for Biden?
Do you think he's still going to have the debates?
100%. I think he can't afford not to.
Why not? I think my calculation would be, if I was the Biden campaign, is I can't afford to debate Donald Trump.
Oh no! If he does that, he will lose. But I 100% believe that.
Good, because I'm really looking forward to these debates. I don't see how he's going to be able to stand up to one of the more skilled debaters. Donald Trump might be his biggest opponent in these debates, because if he goes too hard on the old man, who's had a pretty tough run of things, then he could end up looking,
elder abuse.
Elder abuse. It'd be hard to convince the American people that Donald Trump is a mean and callous man, but I think this could do it if he beats up on Grandpa. There's something about Biden already, even before, where Americans look at the guy and even though it's not really true to how he is, the onion idea of him washing his car in the driveway is more how we think of him, even though it's completely untrue. We see ourselves in him. It's like he's one of us, and even to see him go through what he's going through right now, obvious cognitive decline, is extremely familiar to so many people in America already. And Donald Trump going out there and beating on him like a whack-a-mole could backfire.
The most interesting thing to me is going to be the next most interesting thing after these conventions is going to be who gets to moderate those debates.
Yeah, I'm also not quite as bullish as you on a tough question being asked of Joe Biden.
No, he's going to. No,
I hope you're right.
No. I think you misunderstand. Trump will ask the question
Oh,
himself.
yeah.
What are you
going to do about that? Come on, man. Come on.
Come on, man is not an answer, by the way, to anything that anyone
It worked.
can accept.
That and a couple endorsements in South Carolina changed the midterms.
You realize that's
primaries.
that's from South Park. That's South Park. Jimmy and Timmy are able to end the gang war between the Crips and Bloods by standing up there in front of them and saying,
Come on.
Come on.
It's a reasonable question. Or reasonable request. Okay. Come on.
All right, Chris. I look forward to hearing what you think of the next couple days of the convention and where we go from there. And thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Ben Domenech. You've been listening to another edition of the Federalist Radio Hour. We will be back soon with more. Until then, be lovers of freedom and anxious for the fray.